Bright Foundation, which is a public benefit organization. They are involved in education, the empowering of people with disabilities, poverty alleviation, nature conservation, and the promotion of the arts and culture. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Franco.
I was very fortunate to grow up on a cattle and maize farm in the rural Northwest Province, far away from bright city lights and big business. In such a community with this huge inherent risk and consequent focus on survival, I encountered philanthropy at an early age, even though the term itself was foreign to me. When I was about 10 years old, I noticed the cornerstone of our small school building, which housed between 50 and 60 kids from grade 1 to grade 7, and that it was laid by my maternal grandfather. That was not of much importance to me, but I became curious when I saw a similar thing at the church, the community hall, and at the co-op. I asked my mother why this was the case, whether there was a secret in our family that I actually had a politician as a grandfather. And she replied, no, he was none of the sort. He did these things because he cared, and he believed that he had a duty to make a difference to where he lived. It was only when I went to university and I discovered that part of my studies was funded by the Godman Study Trust that he created for his descendants 30 years ago, that I started delving deeper into this person. I learned that he was a remarkable, resourceful and enterprising man who rose from humble beginnings to become a legend in our region in his time. His philanthropic acts went far beyond our little settlement. As someone who experienced the ravages of the Anglo-Boer War and had to deal with the destruction of the burnt land policy that brought that upon farming communities, rendering thousands impoverished and incapable of taking care of themselves, even more so after the Great Drought and Depression in the early 1930s. He was committed to everything he could, to do everything he could to improve the life of those affected. Although he was a teacher by training and a farmer by profession later, he was very committed to transforming the area where he lived. But he soon realized that its limitations, and he thought wider. And he was instrumental in organizing the struggling farmers in our area into the Northwest Cooperative to improve their skills and their buying power. He was a co-founder of Reddingsdaadbond, a countrywide organization aimed in the 1930s at alleviating the deep poverty many Afrikaners found themselves in at the time, and was also a co-founder of the First National Bank, sadly not the one today, otherwise I'd be able to give a lot more, which was aimed at providing banking services to people who were very much excluded from the formal banking sector at the time. Isn't it amazing, 90 years later, that how many of the same challenges we still are faced with across our continent? Much of this I learned by thumbing through a battered copy of the Who's Who of South Africa of somewhere in the 1930s, which I found hidden in the bookshelves of our bedroom on the farm. My father never told me any of this, and only filled in some details when I asked. I thought it was not just that special, it was just a case of someone caring for his community. That made a deep impression on me, and I resolved to do something similar should I ever be fortunate enough to do so. I also was very much under the impression that if I were able to do so, one should do it in an understated manner. This resulted in the formation many years later of the Bright Foundation, and which became a shareholder of the Bright Group from its inception in the early 2000s. I realized that the tax laws, as I'll touch upon later, are very unforgiving when it comes to donating money. Once you've made it, you better give it away before you make it. So we decided to give a significant amount of the equity of our new group to the Bright Foundation when we started it. And so the concept of sharing and giving away became embedded in the DNA of our group and every business that we've become involved in subsequently. Margaret Mead said, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. In fact, it is the only thing that ever has." Ladies and gentlemen, life is not linear. I learned that over and over again. Every time when I think back about the trials and tribulations, swings and roundabouts, dead ends and highways, bad luck and incredible synchronicity that shaped my career and our business, I feel very fortunate and under the deep impression of our obligation to share not only the financial rewards we were entrusted with, but also the lessons we learned and the skills and insights we developed along the way. Much of Africa's current successes and future potential resides in the business sector. Entrepreneurship, the efficient allocation of capital and management of human and financial capital, the development and utilization of technological innovation in harnessing our resources can and should drive us forward, converting the proverbial dark continent into the bright continent, no pun intended, where the future resides. This will only happen if we match business with the need to protect our environment and nurture our people. It is a sad truth, as a businessman I have to admit, that the bigger a business is, the more it objectifies the resources it uses, especially the environment and the people that's not directly involved in it. The bigger the business, the more abstract the thinking. Africa needs big business though, with ambitious projects to transform itself into an economic powerhouse. But in itself, this carries enormous risk. Governments are the primary agents tasked with providing the legal and institutional framework within which businesses should both flourish and be contained. Unfortunately, power and greed are two gods, which, while powerful on their own, becomes almost irresistible when combined. And I want to say that again. Power and greed are two gods, which, while powerful on their own, become almost irresistible when combined. Our continent is riddled with examples of these forces in action, resulting in the disregard for and abuse of people and the environment. The only counter to greed and power is love. Philanthropy is love in action. Without philanthropy at every level, we will destroy as much, if not more, than we create. In order to be an effective counterweight to these powerful forces, philanthropy needs to learn the secrets of their success and employ that in a benevolent manner. While every good deed and initiative makes a difference, philanthropic efforts need to be better coordinated, focused and results-driven if we wish to optimize its impact and meet the very visible challenge of greed and corruption. This is not a new challenge, ladies and gentlemen. Aristotle said many centuries ago, to give away money is an easy matter and in any man's power. But to decide whom to give it, and how large, and when, and for what purpose, and how, is neither in every man's power nor an easy matter. I think that's very true. This was amplified by James Allen Smith, who stated somewhat darkly that the greatest harms occur when gifts are bestowed haphazardly, without forethought, without regard to their effects. Hence my delight at this initiative taken to hold this conference to provide critical analysis of the state of philanthropy across the continent, its strengths and challenges, philosophical roots and ambitions, funders, managers and objectives. The better we understand who the players are and what they are driven and motivated by, what areas of intervention are being targeted or left out, share the lessons that we've learned by success and failure, the more true to our calling and the more successful as philanthropists we will be. Since philanthropic acts invariably do what governments are really supposed to do with our tax money, but often fail to do, because of a number of reasons. There are the understandable causes such as lack of income, competing priorities, limited executing capacity, etc. There are also many unforgivable ones, such as disregard for its people, corruption, ineptitude. One would think that governments would go out of their way to create a legal and regulatory framework to encourage philanthropic giving. Sadly, this is not the case in South Africa, nor to my knowledge anywhere else in Africa. In fact, my sense is that legislation in our country is driven to limit the amount of money you can give away. Everything but a modest percentage of your income will be regarded as a donation, attracting a tax of around 20%. This would be understandable if one were merely giving money away in order to reduce your estate for tax purposes, but it's clearly counterproductive when genuine philanthropy is at play. This is very significantly different to America, for example, where if you donate your whole art collection to a museum, that whole amount gets deducted from tax because it's a national gift to the benefit of it all. And really in the end, what about tax money? It is a national gift to the benefit of it all. And it becomes an alternative way of taxation. No such rules exist in Africa, as far as I know. It should be a major thing that we all together in the philanthropic ecosystem should work towards lobbying, towards lobbying government to have more generous rules pertaining to giving. Our tax laws does address this to some extent in Section 18 of the Income Tax Act, which allow for the registration of public benefit organizations, which are exempt from capital gains and income taxes once functional, provided that certain strict criteria are met. And as Cici said last night, lots and lots of paper have to be put. Anyway, it's still there, and if you donate your capital to such a public benefit organization, however, you would only get a modest deduction, and the rest of the amounts that you've given will still be subject to a 20% tax. I think that is crazy. Very limited tax incentives also exist for the formation of entities focused on nature conservation, etc. Philosophically, this comes from the deep belief by governments all across the world, and in Africa in particular, that itself is the best custodian of good causes in our country. I believe this is naive and counterproductive. In my daily life, and I'm sure in yours, I see an incredible number of philanthropic initiatives in action. In our household, at our school, community, at work, in our fields of interest such as conservation and the arts. In fact, these activities provide the oxygen necessary for the functionality and survival of activities that shape and enrich our lives way beyond the scope of any governmental interventions. And this should be encouraged rather than hindered by legislation. Art shares many characteristics with philanthropy. It is born out of the very best of us. Our imagination, our creativity, our willingness to expose ourselves, our concerns with the issues of the day that troubles us, our need to express ourselves meaningfully outside the sphere of survival or profit. Both art and philanthropy transcend boundaries, continents, language, race. Both has the power to transform the way we think and operate, how and what we do and what we care about. I believe we can judge a country by the way we treat art and artists, and I believe much the same applies to philanthropy and philanthropists. At the Bright Foundation, we are annually inundated with the needs of our society, whether it be poverty relief, education, medical emergency, etc. And although we apply most of our available funding to education, providing 34 scholarships for students at universities across the country this year, we carve out every year a certain section of our income to dedicate it to support the art and nature conservation projects. It's a very clear challenge for everyone involved in philanthropic giving. Where you apply your capital, what do you direct your efforts to? There are so much need out there. It's very easy to get confused and ineffective. So we believe that over and above recognizing very clear needs, such as education, you should try and make a change in those activities or fields of endeavor that you really love. And for us, art and nature conservation are two activities which we believe every year we should give, because through the act of giving, we become more. And the more we give, the more benefit and the more impact we have.
My name is Musula Ode. I'm the Executive Director at the Africa Philanthropy Forum. We're a vibrant network of philanthropists and social investors who have an interest in inclusive and sustainable development in Africa. And we are proud collaborators on today's event. Give us a round of applause.
He begins, you have asked me to speak on a subject that ordinarily any priest should feel comfortable to talk about. However, there are many reasons why it will be difficult to find common ground on how we conceive of this topic. First, it will not be easy to define the three key words on the topic, namely religion, community, and philanthropy. For example, what religion will we be talking about? Or what kind of community are we talking of? On philanthropy, we think about huge sums of money given out by multi-billionaires towards particular humanitarian services. So we tend to see philanthropy as something that the wealthy do, while we see charity as what ordinary people frequently do to show concern for their communities. The Christian involvement in philanthropy or charity derives from the effort of all Christians to imitate Jesus Christ, who himself went about doing good. Let me turn my attention to a few practical illustrations of how the Catholic Church has often structured philanthropy as a means of strengthening community but also bearing in mind the complex developments of the concept of community over time. Today, there are ideological disputations about the missionary activities in Africa and other parts of the world. However, the fact that the subject of these disputations are using the tools that the missionaries handed over to them, namely education from mission schools, make the disputes largely academic. No amount of disputation can take away the fact that today, a very significant percentage of the elites across Africa, of all religions, are beneficiaries of education offered by Christian missionaries. Furthermore, then as now, it was the missionaries who offered the first signs of professional health services to rural and remote communities. In Nigeria today, there are thousands of Muslims in very high places, stretching from bureaucrats, key traditional rulers such as the Emir of Kano, then Justice Aloma Mukta, the first female Chief Justice of Nigeria, and others, key politicians who were all educated in Catholic schools. Today, the Christian community has the highest number of private universities, hospitals, and clinics in the country. At an international level, the Catholic Church today has such associations as St. Vincent de Paul, dedicated to collecting and distributing aid to its poor members and to others outside the faith community. Organizations like Caritas, Catholic Relief Services, and others have continued to do great work in offering relief. The Catholic Church has set aside one Sunday in the year in which all over the world a collection is taken for what is called Peter's Pence. These monies collected all over the world are forwarded to the Vatican, where they are in turn used around the world to meet the needs of suffering people. And now he gives a few examples of personal experience, so when you tell me we're out of time, I can stop anywhere. As a priest, my experience of being a beneficiary of Catholic education and services prepared me for a role in philanthropy. Coming from a remote village and a poor background, shaped my appreciation of the need to promote these same values to care for others. In effect, they shaped my decision to become a Catholic priest. Being a priest has offered me a viable platform to pursue some of these ideals. Being a bishop and in a peculiar environment has created an even greater sense of urgency. Now, what he does then is to describe his diocese, which has 4 states: Katsina, Kebbi, Sokoto, and Zamfara. They have about 22 schools, primary, secondary, and even nursery schools. He points out that his schools provide some of the best educational results in these 4 states. But he also points out that they are operating in a region which is predominantly Muslim, and only about 10% are Christians, and out of the 10, only about 5% are Catholic. He refers to the fact that this was an Islamic caliphate. This was the Sokoto Caliphate, defeated in 1903 by British colonial rule. And what it has done is to leave a tradition of antagonism between Muslims and Christians, which they face in their work, both in education and in health, and which has informed movements such as Boko Haram. But he goes on to say why they persist in their charity and the difference their charity make in this primarily Muslim community. Let me move to a conclusion. So his examples, I have skipped several. He says, if we see philanthropy as politics or economics, our focus might be on the size of donations or contributions. We will tend to focus on those billionaires who have made so much money that they are now involved in giving it away for various causes. To be sure, philanthropy will continue to be an exciting subject of debate and discussions, But I think it is important to recognize and encourage the ordinary things that ordinary people do. Those little things that everyone can participate in. Those little acts of human concern which make us human. Thank you.
The philanthropic culture is not what really can do. It's little less than what it can do in my part of the world. And then I had an opportunity to go to the Center for Philanthropy at CUNY University, and Catherine McCarthy is here, professor. And I learned about, it's like my research was on Islamic philanthropy in the US. So basically the same influences of the religious text, but into people and organizations living in a different, much more encouraging environment. And I saw the difference. I can see the difference in the way they manage their philanthropy, and they are oriented towards development and empowering people and using technology to receive money and invest shares in even income-generating projects that support education all over the world. So I came back to Egypt back then with very determined that what we need was a center like the Center for Philanthropy, and I worked on that with back then at AUC to start the Center for Philanthropy. And we also need a community foundation, and this is the community foundation that I founded, that revived the religious giving in concepts that promote sustainability, but in a secular way that is inclusive to whoever, Christians or Muslims. It's not based on religion yet. It takes our tradition. Okay. I will go a little bit also to something that I found fascinating, that why is it that religion really contributed to the fact that in very impoverished communities we keep the philanthropy going? Simple answer was that religion institutionalized philanthropy in the religious text. And the way it's institutionalized it, I can speak it from, for example, the Islamic faith. We have the zakat. I don't know how many heard about zakat, but for example, zakat, it's like the amount of money you need to give for charity or development. And this amount of money is really specific, 2.5% of the accumulated capital that you own over a period of 1 year. You have to give 2.5% out of that so you don't have stagnation. You give zakat to those who are embedded. So if somebody in debt, if somebody is in debt, even if this person can be considered a rich person, yet is in debt to continue the business, is entitled to receive your giving. And this opens the way for us as a foundation, for example, working with local community philanthropy. If we want money for social entrepreneurs to start and kick off their projects, that they are entitled to receive also zakat. Another condition of zakat that there is ownership, so that the people would get this capital and feel their ownership of it. So it's an empowerment factor. And for me, these are all factors for social change. I don't want to talk more about Islamic philanthropy because I come from a culture where Christian and Islamic philanthropy are very present. Christian giving in Egypt is also it's a very considerable giving. The Copts of Egypt, they are more institutionalized in terms of giving to the church. The Muslims give more individually. This is according to our research. And the Christians of Egypt give 10% of their income, the good ones, the good Christians of Egypt, 10% of their income, and the first salary they ever gain in their work, which is called bukur. Okay, can I continue? 6 years. I think it should be good. Okay. I stick this. I just wonder, to make it shorter than I envisioned. There is definitely something wrong because with all this we have a lot of poverty still. And we have a lot of struggles within the civil society service. And actually, religious people in Egypt, I think they play a role in this because their religious discourse, what they say to people is basically only charity driven. We find in ads that now that with the media, for example, you open TVs, especially after the Sun this is Ramadan, we are now in Ramadan. So in Egypt, for example, during Ramadan, you open TV and you find only ads for organizations getting charity, receiving, and then they show you the most devastating pictures of children in the Cancer Institute and orphans, and it's very heartbreaking and always covered by a mufti or a religious figure say, your zakat goes to this place, you go there, you go there. So in light of all this, organizations, community foundations, organization work on development find it also very competitive to compete with deja awareness that is distorted about where their money should go, and religious people have the legitimacy saying where the people should get their money. So you find basically that the civil society is competing, really competing with a very not very encouraging environment, competing with the religious organizations. And also with the government. Even the government is collecting funds for charity work. So it's a very big competition.
I'd love to just start from where my colleague Marwa stopped. That over the years, religious philanthropy has been in existence, foremost from the point of view of charitable giving. But we still have a lot of poor people, especially in the different parts of Africa where we carry out our work. And in my own opinion, one of the things responsible for that is the way we organize ourselves and the kind of focus areas and also how we go about doing it. Christian minister and social entrepreneur, if you could put it that way. I'll say that the premise for what we do primarily was born out of the philosophy of someone like Martin Luther King Jr., who said that any religion that professes to be concerned about the soul of man and is not concerned about the slums that damn them, the economic conditions that strangle them, and the social conditions that cripple them, is a spiritually moribund religion awaiting burial. MLK was a reverend gentleman, as we all know, and a social activist. But I took a lot from this several years ago when we started to think about what perspective religious institutions should have towards philanthropy and how we go about helping people. As a minister, whether, in any religion for that matter, Muslim, Christian, Hinduism, whatever, you are tempted a lot of the time to think that your major role is how people adhere strictly to the tenets of your religion. And eventually, for instance, as a Christian, we believe in going to heaven and how we get people to heaven. And we focus on that so much to the point that we don't think about how they contribute to the betterment of our world, which is also equally important. From the Bible, we also see in the book of James 1:26 and 27 what real religion is. He said, if anyone among you thinks he is religious and does not bridle his tongue but deceives his own heart, this one's religion is useless. Pure and undefiled religion before God and the Father is this. He said to visit orphans and widows in their trouble and to keep oneself unspotted from the world. Simply put, concern about other people, the welfare of other people. So you can say, from this definition, you can't separate religion from philanthropy. Yeah, because philanthropy is about caring for people. True religion cannot only be about relationship with God. It has to also be about relationship with other people and how they fare. yeah, and how what's going on, around them. Now, let me make a case very quickly. Religion in Africa has been presented as a means to, deliver oneself from poverty rather than being the hope of the world, and that's a problem in itself. And I can speak more for Western Africa, where I live. I live in Lagos, Nigeria, and I travel a lot around West Africa and maybe a bit of East Africa. And I realized, especially around certain sects of Christianity, that the focus of the way we proselyte, as in looking for converts, is more about promising them that they're going to fare better, they're going to get richer, they're going to get better, they're going to be, God's going to answer the prayers, and all that. And in that, wise, it's possible, or it's not as possible. What it's doing to people is to have a selfish mindset to the way they go about religion. And we can do a lot better if we paint a better picture, which is more about you can be the home of your own world and the world around you, which will engender a heart of philanthropy if we choose to do that. This is where I'm going. Just February this year, we had a medical intervention project, which was well organized because it's no longer, this wasn't about religion again, it was more about philanthropy. The Pistis Foundation, which I chair the board, which was started by the church, and this was about 3 years ago, and we looked at pulling money from our savings and endowing this organization with a first endowment of about $1 million. And it was not common, because we expect that this small amount of money that people give should go into just doing, like I said, things like soup kitchen. Don't do anything big. Don't try to do what government would do or what Ford Foundation would do and stuff like that. But I realized that when an organization is well set up, even if it's a religious organization and has the right kind of leadership, you can insist that certain things be done in a way where you can measure impact and make the right impact. Let me digress to say this quickly, that if we look at philanthropy from the point of view of how altruistic we are with our motives, you realize that the people in the religious sector are the most altruistic, because we get into what we do not because there's any promise of big amount of money that you're going to be paid. So the heart is already there. So with that heart, if you get a mix of the heart and the training and the right structures and systems in place, I think we're going to make a lot more progress. We're going to go a lot further. The project I was talking about in February was about bringing healthcare to the less privileged, and I mean at that very high level. Things like having surgeries done, eye surgery, hysterectomy, all kinds of surgery. And at the end of the day, with collaborations and all that, we're able to get 200 health professionals to come together. Yeah. And over the period of 6 days, they attended to over close to 4,000 people with over 6,000 cases and over 200 major surgeries. It was like, if I'll say, a miracle, because even people were surprised about how much can be done with that. But if you talk about post-op care and all that, all we did was to put some fund together for that and partnered with certain hospitals and say, if you can partner with us, not charging beyond a particular level, take care of the post-op for like 4 weeks so that everybody will be okay. And I tell you today, all the people who went through the project, all the less privileged people are okay. Some of those surgeries would have cost them, in total, maybe about $300,000 to $400,000, and the project cost just $100,000. Yeah. So, what I'm saying in essence is this: there's a lot in the religious sector that is yet untapped, and I think with greater collaboration with the movers in the philanthropic world who understand how to create the right structure, you will do a lot of help if you will leverage the heart that is already existing there. Because the average priest, the average pastor who is well-meaning has the heart already to help. And with that, we can do a lot more with fighting religious extremism. Because at the medical outreach, the medical event project, there were loads of Muslims. After they've been attended to, they will get to know that maybe the foundation was founded by a church. And then they love the church a little bit more. They don't have to become Christians. They just have to have the right heart. Because in my nation right now, many people are dying from religious extremism. You know about Boko Haram? But I have people in Lagos who are Muslims who ordinarily Boko Haram would have been able to entice, but will not yield to that just simply because they know they're benefiting from the philanthropic deeds from churches and Christians. And I think with this we can have a better world. Thank you.
The West looked relatively less religious than Africa. Africa seems to be in recent time more religious than the West. Why do we still have a larger percentage of income inequality in Africa with a greater heart of giving than the West?
The role of religious institutions in our communities, because on the one hand, religious institutions preach charity, giving, and building our community. And on the other hand, they're holding the dagger that breaks the community. On the one hand, we say we need to build our communities, it's lovely, we want a community that's developing. And on the other hand, our religious sectors are preaching the kind of gospels and philosophies that are breaking our communities. Just one example before I get away off the mic. On the one hand, you say homosexuality is an abomination. Well, an abomination means somebody needs to be killed. And on the other hand, you say, oh no, we are a religious institutions and we're promoting peace and security in our communities. There's a very, very huge distortion there. And I think it's something that the gentleman was alluding to.
The first person asked about African traditional forms of philanthropy and what the day focus on, and if Africans are more religious than the West, why does the West lead African philanthropy? I think when VC Adam Habib spoke at large, he pointed to an important phenomenon in terms of African philanthropy, which traditionally is the focus on kinship and community. And how we see that today in philanthropic giving, even in South Africa. There are those who have been wealthy, second, third, fourth generations, and not necessarily wealthy, but people with resources. Let me point to Frank's Keynote. His grandfather was doing things in a sense that has motivated him to do things. By the time you get to the second and the third generation, the perspective goes beyond the kinship group, the community. Most of the wealthy black South Africans, this is first generation wealth. They haven't gotten to the point that they have that perspective. So they still give in very narrow ways, and I can give many examples that I will not do. In Bishop Kukah's paper, he pointed out how Christian philanthropic giving has created this tradition that some of the largest givers today are still from Europe and North America because of a Christian tradition. So they may be less practicing today, but that ethic has not ceased. And it informs their philanthropic giving today. So that was the point.
The West, they're currently in what we call post-Christian era. So proselyting and public presentation of religion and the faith has reduced, but the Judeo-Christian principle upon which the communities were built on still remain. So you don't have to carry a Bible to walk in those values. In Africa, we are trying to bring those same values of Jesus Christ to the people, because that wasn't some of those values were not there before. I hope you're getting what I'm saying. So, but there, it has been institutionalized. It's there. When you go I was in Oxford University at one time, and you realize that Oxford, Cambridge started by the church, and the principles were in the foundation up till now. So philanthropy and endowment actually started more in the West, with Judeo-Christian principles being the foundation of it. We need to do a bit more in Africa, especially with new generation of Africans, to embrace this as a principle to live by, not just religion. Yeah. So, but when you talk generally about how we're deeply religious and we're still very poor and all that, I think a lot of it has to do with the survival instinct that we're fighting with in Africa, which in my own country engenders a lot of corruption. Because people go to church, go to mosque, but when it comes to money, they forget about religion. They do the deals, all the shady deals. In fact, they pray before they discuss the shady deals. And they still do it. And move on. Just one more. From my brother. He was asking why, for instance, traditional religion worshippers and all that were not included. Well, it's something to think about. But your claim about them being the provider at the lowest level, I think I have a little counter-argument against that, especially in Western Africa. There's no village in my country that doesn't have a church and that doesn't have a mosque and all that. So that narrative has changed in Western Africa to a very large extent. People, we relate. We have interfaith community where we relate, and people in traditional African worship can also be a part of the discourse. So they're not excluded. They're not excluded. Though a lot of the religion are going to extinction, and the main reason is because that religion is not as forward-looking and developmental in its psyche as the religion from the West, if you can put it that way. But we can discuss that outside of here, but I'm just putting that on the table.
I was just wondering, can I disagree with the pastor?
Go ahead.
Okay.
That's why we're here.
I love this.
That's why we're here.
Okay, then I will.
I just want to make it clear, it's not this pastor.
It's that pastor, okay. Because you represent the bishop, I wouldn't dare. Actually, for the same question about what happened, what was happening before the existence of Islam and Christianity, actually coming from a country that we have a history, documented history, that gives us stories about that like 7,000 years back. I can't interfere in this. And actually, it's not the principles of Christianity, nor is it the principles, for me, of Islam that really put the foundations of philanthropy or even institutionalized philanthropy, honestly. Because looking at the culture of Egyptians, the waqf as a system, although it is embedded in Islamic religion, but we have waqf in the pharaoh's time, because people, when they don't have religion, they invent gods. So we had gods. We had gods, we had the sun god, we had Amun, we had Ra, we had waqf foundations exactly like those in the Arab and Muslim era that were done by community philanthropy, supporting temples, supporting education, supporting everything. So I'm sorry.
No, I'm actually talking not about Egypt. Egypt is very old. Okay. I'm talking about America. I'm talking about Australia. I'm talking about the new. I actually said the West. You understand? England, Europe. They're not as bold in their
But
especially
you
America.
can draw an example from
Oh
the
yes,
Keynote,
yes.
I think that's why you're here, Marwa.
I think you're actually agree.
All right. Great. So, next round of questions.
When I see what's happening in Africa from my own vantage point in Silicon Valley, and when I read about what's happening, I'm always asking this question: where is the relationship between human rights and religion in Africa? And we don't have to answer the question, but I think we need to reflect on it. Because there is dualism, religion plays a role. I mean, don't get me wrong, I grew up in a Coptic Orthodox and Catholic house. So you can imagine how much I'm religiously inclined. But then over the years, 35 years since I left home, you start to really figure out who you are as a human being. And I'm trying to really see what's happening in Africa. So there is a proliferation of evangelism. And so charity didn't start with Christianity. Charity started many years ago, and it's also individual. But Muslims have the same thing, this whole 10% principle. I grew up also in Eritrea, where one of the amazing countries that has Muslims and Christians living together in harmony than any other African countries that I can imagine. So I really know that life, but I am also concerned about what I see today in Africa. And I'm also wondering how much fear is playing, fear with that religion and fear. I think there's all these things are put together, something is happening. I'd like to hear from you.
That Christianity and Islam are foreign for who? Egyptians and Ethiopians and some Sudanese have been Christian for at least 1500 years. So when does that become indigenous? Ethiopians were Christian before the British. So let's be very careful in the usage of our terminologies about Africa.
I have the privilege of speaking to pastors fairly regularly, almost on a monthly basis in different cities, different countries. I'm invited to speak to pastors. And we go through this together, just to give them a better sense that the only way we can create a developed Africa is when we have Africans who will not lose their mind because of religion, who will be forward-looking, who will be able to think through how Africa will come out of where we are, and the barrier will not be religious mindsets that are anti-development. And pastors must be at the front burner of that. Whether you're a Christian, Muslim, Hindu, traditional worshiper, everybody wants to live in a developed Africa. That's a common denominator. And we must give people the right mindset that can engender development.